you battling with picky eating, gaming, addiction, and your child just doesn't want to do what you want them to do? They're battling against you, they're rejecting you, they're rejecting your food, they're rejecting your lifestyle choices. Well, I've got something to share with you this podcast. You want to make a YouTube video? So I have just recorded the training for this monthly session in the Autism Turnaround membership. And sometimes I like to take you behind the scenes and share the good stuff with you. And this month was a really great training. It was about the 7 steps to overcome resistance from your child. So if you have a child that's picky eating, very picky and narrow with the food choices, doesn't want to eat your food, doesn't want to try new things, work against your autism turnaround process, whatever you are doing in your life to try and get your child to a better place, to try and get your child to independence. If you're struggling with this, the training this month inside the membership would have been a great idea for you. We also went through a big Q&A, but I'm sharing those 7 steps with you in the podcast this month. And you can also download the 7 steps as a PDF in the description below this video, wherever you're listening to the Barefoot Autism Warriors podcast. And if you want to be part of this training, go to barefootautismwarriors.com and look at the program, other podcast episodes, or contact me directly for a conversation about a game plan for your turnaround with your child. See you soon. I want to start with the question that I've gotten the most this time around this month, which is about children rejecting new foods. And it's all about leadership, but it plays out in different types of conflicts. So I'm also going to give you today a checklist when it comes to battles and conflicts with food and children, especially children on the spectrum, children with ADHD, a checklist that I want you to go through when you're having issues with food, so that you know that, okay, I've ticked all these boxes and I know that my foundation is in place. It's always one of the points that I'm going to share with you today in this checklist that is causing issues with food, whether it's for us or for our children. So Joanna and Lena and several other moms, I think we have 5 moms this month, who are struggling to get their children to try new things, or struggling with a child being very narrow and picky with the eating, meaning they only want to eat certain foods, or refusing to eat. So some children in this community don't want to eat meat. Some children have cravings and all they want to eat is fruit or sweets or chocolate. And the question is, for at least for Lena and for Joanna and for other moms as well, Lisa, is how do I do this without getting my nervous system dysregulated? Because this is how she describes it. I give my child this food, he refuses it again and again and again, and I get all stressed out, and my nervous system seems completely unbalanced, and I don't want to get myself sidetracked. I don't want to feel stressed, and I also want to focus on other things. I don't want everything to be consumed by the thought of and the battles with food. So how do I avoid conflicts? How do I get this done without getting into fight and flight in my nervous system? Yeah, so I want to start with that. And I know Joanna also said, how do we deal with this in a dysfunctional setting in the family where our partners are not supportive? This is often the case, that a partner or an ex-partner is working against this, or they themselves are on a really unhealthy diet and therefore don't see the point in changing the diet for the child. The first thing I want to say about this is that going through this dark space of changing the diet for our children who are picky eaters, who are refusing to eat the nutrients that they literally need to build brain cells, bones, learn, sleep, grow, and be able to have emotional control, because they need a stable blood sugar to do that. They need food for the neurotransmitters to fire and do what they need to do to combat tantrums, to regulate undermethylation. We're going to talk a lot about that today, because without food that is actually regulating and balancing that methylation imbalance, we'll have a problem with neurotransmitters, dopamine and serotonin. So our children will be moody, they will be aggressive, they will be angry, they will throw tantrums, they will not be able to learn, they will not grow. When they don't grow, the brain don't grow. So they won't be able to fit into society, to learn the skills that's needed to be in a friendship, to learn things, to have a relationship one day, to go and take a driver's license. So the things that I fed my child in the turnaround process were the things that got rid of his issues and then gave him the nutrients that could help him overcome the gap in development, so that he is now someone who's participating in society and in conversations, drives his own car, goes for job interviews without involving me, writes his own applications, friendships, and arranges his own concerts, like becoming a citizen that is independent. That's what we are here for your independence and for your child's independence. And food is so incredibly important for that. But the way that we relate to food, and the reasons why some moms are still battling with this, is that we cannot look at food as a satellite. And this is why we have 5 phases in this process. And it's also why some moms need to go through the 5 phases more than once. So it's an illusion. I'm going to put it out there. It's an illusion to go through a war zone and a complete 360 degrees turnaround in the nutritional field, emotional field, leadership field, family dynamics field, and biochemical field, which is diet and changing diet. You will have an upset in your nervous system. You will get into fight and flight. We don't turn our life around in the most challenging areas in life, which is about food and body and parenting and learning to live. What we're teaching our children at the dinner table is how to behave in the world and navigate in the world. Those of you who are thyroid types, the skills that you are lacking that is currently causing procrastination for you, thyroid problems, sleep issues, weight issues, energy issues, exhaustion, depression, self-sabotage, and numbness, is the fact that somewhere in your past, the nourishment and housing, roof over the head, food on the table, and nourishing the body, clear boundaries, and safety was never in place for you. In some area, that's quite the antenna I've got there, huh? In some areas, you didn't get that education of, this is what we eat in this family. You can be certain that you're well nourished and that you sleep at night, and that I protect you against intruders and abuse. And that malnourishment might have been emotional. That malnourishment might have been that your parents fed you junk food when you actually needed real food, or that it didn't feel safe to be in the family because no one was actually in leadership, demonstrating by lived experience and by example, what does it look like to be well nourished when we don't feel nourished, when we don't feel safe, and it might be that you had junk food instead of real food in your family. It might be that you didn't feel safe and you weren't put to sleep when you needed to be put to sleep. It might be that your parents didn't offer a good leadership because they didn't know how to take care of their own body. They didn't know how to say yes and no in a loving and consistent way. So when you went into the world as a young person and took risks and were supposed to take that responsibility on for yourself, go out and provide, find food, find money, find a place to live, you were not equipped by boundaries. I know this is kind of getting a bit complicated, but hear me out because this will make sense. If our parents haven't withdrawn and said no and set clear boundaries and taken away that nourishment that we get when we are tiny kids, where whenever you need food, you can have food. When you're crying, I'm going to comfort you immediately. When you're screaming, I'm going to give you what you need. At some point, that has to stop. That has to stop completely. Because as a child, when you go into young adults, teenage years, you need to understand that your needs are not always provided immediately. And if you have a healthy childhood and healthy parents who have really made you feel safe when you're little, that cut those boundaries, that umbilical cord that's cut when you're becoming a teenager, it's a very important life crisis. It doesn't feel good for anybody, but it becomes impossible in dysfunctional families. And this is why you are now here with thyroid type stress issues, where you keep abandoning yourself, you keep not feeding yourself well, you keep promising yourself things that you can't keep, promises you can't keep, you keep staying up late when you want to sleep, you keep saying yes when you mean no, or you procrastinate in the turnaround process, or you numb out, whatever you do. And that's because you didn't have the original foundation and you didn't have the strong leadership that made it safe for you to go out there and risk and take that responsibility for yourself. Now, what happens in a family where children say, I don't want to eat meat at 11, 9, 10, 11 years old? And they say they reject your food, or they only want to eat fruits, or they only want to eat chocolate, or they only want to eat nuggets. And somehow it becomes, well, I'm going to stick with the safe foods because if I don't, my child will just not eat and she will starve. That, my friends, is a very dangerous situation for this child's brain development, for this child's understanding of its own self and body and safety, and for its ability to understand what values are and what boundaries are and what a safe environment is. Because what's the most unsafe environment that a child can be in? I can tell you that the environment that I offered my children was the most unsafe environment you can imagine, because I was no leader of my own body and my own eating and my own boundaries. I'd lived a whole life disregarding my own body and my own needs and just in sheer survival. So, and I was afraid of anger and I was afraid of rejection because I come from a very dysfunctional family background with a psychopathic, narcissistic stepfather and a dad that weren't there, and my mom who chose my stepfather rather than me because she was scared. So when my children were angry, I couldn't handle anger, and I could not handle a no, because a no and rejection for me was, I was kicked out when I was around 13. So no meant I'm losing my home, I'm losing my mom, I'm losing safety, and I actually didn't have enough money for food in the beginning. So in sheer fear of anger from anybody, I did everything to avoid anger from my children and resistance from my children. And also I wanted to cushion them from discomfort, the discomfort that I knew so well as a child. And for my autistic child, it was one scenario. And for his little brother, it was even worse, because I felt so guilty about autism that I allowed him to do whatever he wanted and never had any boundaries. If he wanted a pair of very expensive shoes, I would just work myself to the ground to be able to afford them. So when I said no and they screamed or got angry, I gave them what they wanted. That was interpreted by them as, okay, then if she's not in leadership and she's not controlling the ship, I guess we're going to have to take over. Subconsciously, that's happening in children, whether they're on the spectrum or more neurotypical, like my youngest son, and they take over. So they take over that leadership. Extremely unsafe for them, because I was clearly not a leader and I was afraid to set boundaries. All this to say that for those of you who have children who do not want to eat real foods, there's no way around a complete overhaul, clear boundaries, and saying no and receiving the anger that will cause you. So we have to ask ourselves, when this happens, when our children don't want to eat anything, they refuse to eat, or they just want sweet stuff. Here are the questions that we need to ask ourselves. So here's the checklist. You might want to take notes if you want this checklist for yourself. Food refusal and picky eating checklist. Just want to say one more thing. A true soldier does not show his capacity or her capacity or brilliance when it's peaceful, at peacetime. A true soldier is shaped in the war zone. So this is your test. What type of soldier are you? Are you a good soldier or are you not? Because it's in the darkness, it's in the dark valleys that we are shaped and tested. And so this is your test. So let's go through the checklist that I want you to go through when you are having these issues with your children, whatever the issue is. Number one, and I'm going to preface this by saying, sometimes we got to realize during this turnaround journey, and I do want to acknowledge this is not an easy journey. And this is why we're such a small group of people here. You know, it's 1 out of 36 children with autism. How many are we in this community? Not a lot. And that's because you have extreme determination and wit and fighter spirit and guidance. So I know that you are made out of something really special and that you're equipped to do this. I also know that this is not by any means, shape or form easy. So we have got to understand that we have a window to save our children, and at some point that window closes. And so we got to take every week seriously, every month, every year seriously, because every year is a gap that will be left in our children's development that we then need to pick up. So self-sacrifice is part of this. Even though we're focusing on our own healing and our own journey, self-sacrifice is part of this journey. There was one really interesting question about high aluminium. So who was it with high aluminium? I think it was Lena Traube from Australia. And then we had another interesting case of binge eating. So a mom who's been binge eating since she was 7,
high carb foods. She's also dealt with ADHD, PTSD, ADHD, and I think anxiety. Correct me if I'm wrong. And she's realized that keto diets help, stabilizes her mood, also for her autistic child, by the way. And I'll explain to you why and what the link is to the metal overload that Lena has. Her metal levels are sky high, and she is feeling extremely stressed about that. Now, the reason why you're feeling better when you're eating keto, because you're saying definitely we're eating a lot of meat and a lot of fats, and we're feeling better. But we are avoiding, I think you were avoiding certain foods. No, you're asking, can I eat more carbs without ruining the benefits that I'm experiencing right now from the keto diet? So if you're binge eating, or if you have metal overload, and keto or a carnivore kind of diet helps, this is most likely because you're undermethylated, and this is why you have this ADHD, this hyperactivity, and the eating disorders, because it messes with neurotransmitters, hormones, and enzymes. What helps undermethylation? Why is it that undermethylated autistic children and moms cannot be on a vegan diet? Metallothionein. Metallothionein. And I'm probably pronouncing it wrong because I always do. Metallothionein or thionine, metallothionein, I think it's pronounced. It improves the body's ability to detox metals and regulate metal imbalances. So if you have a metal dysregulation, it fixes that. It also improves or helps the body get rid of oxidative stress. And it is a neuroprotective. This is why this mom feels better when she eats meat, because we need meat for donation of metallothionein. So this is also probably, Lena, why you are, it might be, why you are experiencing problems with metals. You have a test that's showing high metal, but I always say be careful with these tests, because there's so many bad tests out there. There's so many bad labs and so many bad results that are misguiding or misleading. Instead, we want to fix foundation. We want to make sure that we add in the things that can cause the body to get rid of metals, regulate metals, and fix the brain and deal with oxidative stress. So let's look at foundation instead of the old way. We do a test. Oh my goodness, I've got metals. I got to detoxify. No, because if we do that, we'll just release these metals into the bloodstream where they do more damage and damage the brain, and we can't even get rid of it because our gut's not in place, our detoxification pathways are not in place, we're still undermethylated, so we can't get rid of these metals. This is why you are feeling better when you're binge eating, and you're feeling better when you do keto, because you're getting meat. So yes, you definitely eat meat, need meat, but the keto is not recommendable for long-term for autism, because you need the vegetables and the carbs to feed the microbiome. And that's very important for your mood as well, and to avoid binge eating. So bake your potatoes and your carrots and your broccoli and serve it with butter. Some people here asked, what's a replacement for butter? I still do butter, or you can do fermented ghee. I don't replace butter because it's almost purely fat, but if you still respond to the casein, you might do fermented ghee without casein in it. So get your potatoes, your carrots, your leeks, your maybe some quinoa, some rice every once in a while, because you need all of it for your microbiome and for your mental health. Number one thing to check is mineral deficiency. So if a child's refusing real foods, there's always an imbalance when it comes to micronutrients, and it's often minerals that's at play here. So zinc deficiency for one. Zinc deficiency causes healthy foods to taste like shit. It really makes food taste horrible, foul, bitter, or bland. And that's why if the zinc levels are not optimal in any children that are in the dark phase of autism until it's fixed and balanced out. Zinc deficiency and B6 deficiency is almost a given for all of our children. And so that makes food taste horrible. So we need to make sure, okay, maybe I'll get some zinc on board. Maybe I'll start slow with a small dose, and you can get 25 milligrams and then half that dose. The good thing about zinc is you can bake it into buns, you can bake it into cakes. It's really hardy, so you can hide zinc because it doesn't taste good. Another thing that can cause these refusals and rejections and picky eating issues is mineral deficiency, like chrome. So chrome causes cravings for sugar and junky foods. Chrome deficiency, so supplementing with zinc and B6 and chrome for yourself as well, if you're someone who's really binge eating or craving sugar, particularly around your period, you might be wanting to add in those minerals and vitamins. Also, there's a lot of magnesium in chocolate. We have children here that moms are describing all they want is chocolate and sweet stuff. Sometimes children go for a chocolate because they want the minerals that's in the chocolate. Sometimes, though, they go for chocolate because chocolate is full of copper, and copper is addictive. So if you have this, I just got to have chocolate all the time, I'm fantasizing about chocolate, I'm binging on chocolate, you might be creating a copper overload through this chocolate eating. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. So think about that and think about adjusting the minerals, and understand that if you add in zinc, you will affect copper levels and you will dump excess copper. That's why you got to start extremely slow and monitor, and don't give anything else but zinc if that's what you're starting and trying out. Use your journal, because it can get really bad really fast. The speed by which zinc levels are optimized is really slow. The speed by which copper is dumped and released when you add zinc into the mix, very fast. So we don't want to dump copper too fast, because ultimately the worst case scenario is that you can cause psychosis. And when we talk about copper toxicity, it's linked to anxiety, anger, aggression, agitation, and psychosis. So watch out for mood swings and mood reactions if you add in zinc. And if you have any of that, stop the zinc and work with a practitioner, or stop the zinc and start over with a tiny dosage of zinc, or use zinc-rich foods instead. If you have any questions as we go through this Q&A, just let me know and I'll bring you on, okay? So Maribel is asking, any particular brand of zinc in the US that you can recommend? I like Now Foods. They have a zinc picolinate, and zinc picolinate is the best form of B6. Zinc, sorry. It's quite a high dose. I think it's 50. So you gotta open it up and divide it into smaller portions. That was number one. Number two, dopamine. The refusal, the anger, the cravings, the resistance, the binging, whether it is you who are binging, because I've got questions from moms who have this issue, or your child that is binging on unhealthy foods. It's the same thing. Dopamine. If we are constantly fed actions of food that will trigger this massive dopamine peak, whether it's sugar or alcohol or gaming or scrolling or iPads or thrill, or for some people, they do porn. This peak in dopamine will also cause a rapid drop in dopamine. And that's when you cannot control your cravings. And it doesn't matter what you say and what you do, you need to have it. You need to have your sugar, you need to have your carbs, you need to have your alcohol. We have moms here who are using alcohol to cope with this. So what we want to do here then is we want to make sure that we have a baseline for dopamine that is balanced. Because when our dopamine level is at a great baseline, we don't get those cravings, and neither do our children. And so the next lesson is going to be all about that. So the next meeting we have, the next training I have, is going to be about how do we do that? How do we combat picky eating and cravings and addictions and procrastination? So if you are not compliant, if you feel like you just cannot pull yourself through this awful turnaround process, that dopamine training will help you tremendously. And it will not be a difficult thing to do. It's actually some really easy hacks that we can use to get our dopamine levels set. And many of the hacks are already inside the membership, but I'm going to do a specific training on how do you do that now. Number 3, strategy and timeline. So when we say, I've already tried and I've already, I'm spending all my time on this. I did try with the meat. There's no way my child's going to eat it. And all my time is spent on food. And I know that if I don't give him the preferred foods, he just won't eat. So we got to understand this. Our timeline for changing this around is at least 1 week. And I suggested one of the moms, keep your child at home for 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. We're coming up towards vacation time for a lot of people now. Use this time to take your child home and keep at home. No social interactions, no birthdays, no parties, no relatives that will give them whatever they want. This is it, and these are the rules. And go cold turkey, meaning there's nothing in your house that's not feeding the brain, building bones, creating neurotransmission, detoxifying, optimizing the gut, so that your child can actually eat whatever is in the cupboards or freezer or fridge, and everything will be fine. Then you cook the meals, the same thing for the whole family. You serve it and you leave it there and you stone face it, meaning they can sense if you're, oh yeah, try this, this is so exciting, and they can sense if you get excited if they eat. So don't do any of that. This is a meal. It's not a drama. It's not a big event. It's basic nourishment. And you can tell them, this is what we're doing. I am now stopping my investment in any foods that I find unloving and that I know won't help you and that I know will damage you. So from now on, I'm not giving you money for food that's damaging, and I'm not buying anything that's damaging. And now we're going to stay at home here to see how that feels to be well nourished. And replacing these fear and reluctant and anxious dynamics around the dinner table by serving as varied a meal as possible, because children are designed to choose between their source of protein, their source of veggies, their source of fiber, their source of fats and nuts. Biologically, that's what they're designed to do. And the more we accommodate the palate that's been destroyed by junk foods and dopamine releasing foods and blood sugar dysregulating foods and microbiome disrupting foods, the more time they need to actually feel a craving for the real foods. But if they get real food, the body will start to call for it. And it takes a while. You will be met with anger. You will be met with hate. You will be met with resistance. And here's where your boundaries come into place, and your values, and your ability to sit with anger, and your ability to have self-control, and your ability not to get involved in the drama. So they will sense that in you, and this is a test for your leadership. We laid out a big buffet that worked for us. So we had all colors of vegetables and fruits, and we made interesting dips and slices of meat. We had some bread, we had different things and berries, and we would just eat. And the kids would leave the table and walk around and come back and then leave again. First couple of days didn't really want anything, and then they started to be curious and come over, look at it, and thinking we didn't see, just taste one thing, maybe one berry. That one berry will feed the microbiome and will teach the soldiers in the microbiome to call for more of that. Because at the moment, if your child has a very monoculture diet, it will be the pathogens and the fungi, the bad fungi, the candida, the parasites that's calling for food. They'll be dictating your child's cravings. So we need to counter that by feeding the microbiome so that it will call for real foods gradually. So the hardcore version is definitely what I recommend. No children will starve themselves to death. I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen. But they know that they can get you to think that they will starve to death. And so it's really a test of your ability to stay calm. And this is why, my friends, that food and eating is in phase 3. After the nervous system healing in phase 1, after distraction and self-sabotage healing in the mindset course, after you've learned about your addictions to problems and healed it, after you've touched on emotional healing and connected with your body and your inner child, after you've done journaling and brain primers and prayers for a couple of months, probably 3, because you need that experience to be able to go through that experience. So what I want to say to you is that phase 1 in a healing process is elimination and removing triggers in your own life, emotional triggers, food, environment. This is what we do in the first phases in the turnaround process. And then it's healing time. For some people, phase 1, it's a couple of months. For some people, phase 1 is 3 months. For some people who are in high cortisol stress, it's 6 to 8 months of just eliminating the triggers so that you are not constantly being bombarded with the things that made you sick and your child sick. Phase 2 is about healing. So only when we remove the things that make us sick. So in other words, if we're in the turnaround process and we still eat gluten and we still stay up late and we're still scrolling on our phone all day long and we're still watching crap TV and we're still staying up late and we're still saying yes when we mean no, our nervous system is still all whacked. We're not going to heal. We're not going to heal. So phase 1 is removing, phase 2 is about healing, and phase 3 is about leading. So only when we have healed can we lead our children through it. So sometimes moms are with me for 1 year and think that it's time to lead. when it's actually still time to heal. So you need to go walk through the jungle before you can take your child through the jungle. That was a long point number 3. So how are you good with rejection? Are you good with anger? Can you sit with anger? If not, you need more emotional healing, more self-sabotage healing, more nervous system healing in phase 1, 2, and the mindset course. Number 4 is the emotional environment. Check the emotional environment. In the beginning stages of the turnaround process, our self-knowledge is not massive. Recognizing danger is not something that we're really good at yet. So recognizing what's right and wrong, red flags and green flags. We have a lot of cortisol stress healing to do. And here are some of the things that our children respond to by refusing our food, by rejecting meat, which is their building blocks and the body knows. They respond very negatively to learned helplessness in us as parents, victim mentality and complaining, dysfunctional familiar circumstances where we're battling with our ex or blaming the ex, or in fact, for me, more and more, I realize divorce in itself was a big mistake. The person that I am today would not have gotten a divorce, because divorce was all about my freedom, my desire, my exhaustion with my husband, me. And so children will not accept that because it's not what was supposed to happen in the family. So I'm saying that even though that's triggering, and I know it's painful because a lot of us got divorced through this, but I do think they respond to that by rejecting us in other ways. A lot of children, including my youngest, he had a 3-year-old complete life crisis, 3 years of life crisis after the divorce. They also respond if we are apathetic or numb. So if we're like spacey, we're not really there, we are like not in the room, whether we are on our phone or not, or whether we are just, you know, when people are there, but they're not really there, or they're in the community, but they're not really there, they're drifting, that you can't get a hold of them. Who are you? What do you feel? What do you stand for? What do you love? What do you hate? What's your values? Where are your boundaries? Show me your boundaries. So that can be the message behind them rejecting your food. The more fluffy you are in your leadership, and the less present and clear you are in your boundaries and values, without drama. This is the rules, and I'm sticking to these rules. You can cry, you can protest. This is what's going on in this house. This is what I stand for. We talked about this a lot in earlier lessons, so I'm going to refer back to. So they're protesting against weakness, unclear boundaries, secrets, anything you think you can hide from them, where you are somebody out here and you're a completely different person on the inside. They're showing you that by rejecting your food or by protesting against you. Marriage conflicts I already mentioned, and lack of consistency and integrity in leadership. So are you the turnaround process? Are you living it? Are you breathing it? Are you doing it? Are you implementing it? Are you demonstrating it by example? That was number 4. Number 5, very quick, dark valleys shape our faith, our character, and they call for us to be joyful about the lesson, joyful about the challenges, because God will counter the challenges and the darkness with miracles, because he only creates problems and dark valleys to build character and faith and to glorify himself. So at the end of a dark valley, there's a mountain, and at the top of that mountain, you will see clearly why you had to go through this. So treasure your dark valleys. It's actually in the dark valleys that you learn. It's in the dark valleys that you're healing your child. It's in the dark valleys that you're getting stronger. So when you're on the top of the mountain, there's no learning, there's no development. It's a break until we dive again. And we will be diving deep quite a number of times over the next months, but I'm here for it and I'm here with you through it. Number 6 is, and if you want to look at dark valleys and what you need and how it is biologically designed so that if you bypass that uncomfortable limbic friction that you're feeling right now, you will be able to completely miraculously turn your child around through it, because you're designed to create crazy things by God's design. So your neurotransmitters and your limbic system is designed to go through these hard times and do the impossible in reality, because God wants to be glorified through it. But biologically, it's completely designed that way. So if you look at the Zoom lessons, the trainings in replays from December, January, and February, it will all make sense, because it's a series of training where I'm covering this. Number 6, biology. Blood sugar, unstable blood sugar will remove appetite for real foods. It will create an irresistible craving for bad foods, and it will cause overeating. So we got to understand that the body has different levels of food cues where it tells you, I need food now. Okay, I'm not getting food. I'm going to amp it up. I'm going to turn up the volume. I need food now. Level 2. If we still ignore it by then, or we just give our children a small meal or ourselves, we tick over to level 3 and 4. And when we tick over to level 3 and 4, we will overeat and binge, and we'll have this inability to feel satisfied. So we got to know our numbers, and that's in the next training. So you know that the upcoming trainings are all about food and dopamine, and I'll teach you about these levels and how to listen to them. This is going to be our new intuitive eating, is to listen to those levels and act upon them so that you don't take over, because that's also causing the body to store fat and it ruins the metabolism. And so we don't want that. So blood sugar, we need that stable for our children, even if it means that they need a little meal every once in a while throughout the day until it's fixed. Timing is important. Eating the same time in the morning and lunchtime and evenings, really important, because the kitchen opens and closes down. So the body gets ready to digest and consume and utilize the nutrients, and then it closes down the kitchen. And we want to use that body clock to eliminate the cravings for unhealthy foods, because it's also a question of timing. Sometimes if we wait too late, or if we don't eat early in the morning and at the same time, it can be a problem and can cause these food refusals or bad eating habits. Sleep is really important. Children need 12 hours at least. And so they need to go to bed with the sun and not stay up late at all. And if they have sleep issues, we've got to fix that. Nature and hydration and nature deficiency is massive. So number 7 and 8 is use your journal. It will tell you what's going on emotionally, physically, biologically, symptom-wise, and the messages behind symptoms. And use it to determine your relationships with food, with your body, with your father, your biological mother, and your partner, because the way that your child responds to food and eating is a reflection of what's going on in your relationship in those areas. And that's what we are here to heal. So I hope that gave you some practical insights into how to deal with this massive issues for so many of us.
I hope you enjoyed being part of the Autism Turnaround community or the membership program just for an hour. We meet regularly on Zoom, and we have a support group in Telegram as well. At least we do in 2023 by the time of this recording. And I support the moms like they were my sisters. So my finest job is to make sure that every single mom knows what to do to get her child to more independence, to a better place when it comes to communication, emotional control, social skills, language, by understanding the underlying message behind each symptoms, and by understanding her child's unique symptom triggers, and by understanding exactly what foods and lifestyle changes and nutritional approaches she needs to address her child's specific problems, because every child's different, every child's needs are different, and the nutritional needs, just the nutritional needs in themselves, they change all the time. So we need to become experts in interpreting our children's symptoms and adjusting lifestyle, nutrition, and other modalities and tools and approaches in order to help them. So if you want to talk to me about how that could be possible for you, go to barefootautismwarriors.com and write me an email or book a call with one of us, and we can come up with a game plan for you, finding out what your outcome needs to be, what's standing in your way, what are your obstacles, and then we can come up with a 3-step game plan for you to get to a better place within the next 6 months. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and if you did, I would love for you to give it a rating, some stars in iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Subscribe to the podcast. It really helps spread the word and getting the podcast out there so that I can get to more moms and get them the help they need. I also really would love your feedback and to talk to you about the podcast or anything else. So go to barefootautismwarriors.com and let's connect. See you next time.